introduce François Paulus. François is the founding partner of Breega, and he is going to talk to us about the venture capital landscape here in Europe. François, let me hand it off to you. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. It's always an easy moment. Hope it's working. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you about the VC capital market landscape in Europe today. So it's going to be short, an introduction to Breega, which is my VC fund, then the European VC landscape, and a couple of trends. And I reckon I have 20 minutes to do that if I understand correctly what I'm about to do. So about myself, I'm both a telecom engineer and an inside MBA. I started my career as a consultant in London. Then I set up a number of companies, mainly one in consulting, which I sold to listed companies, and then one in telco, which I sold to Tiscali, the Milan company. And the third one was a small telco, which became very big because we ended up IPOing the company in 2006 in Paris under the name Neuf CGTL, and we sold it for $8 billion to SFR, who is a mobile operator in France. Then I left the company and the exec committee. I became an angel investor during 5 years. And then I decided, for a reason I'm going to explain, I decided to co-found a VC with my two partners in crime that you can see on the picture there. So a few words about Breega before digging into France and then Europe. So why we decided, so that was back in 2012. And at the time we decided to found a VC that was very different. Of course, for my American friends, and especially from the Silicon Valley, they could argue it's not different from what you do in Silicon Valley since 50 years, but it was different from what we do in France. And mostly, we are an all-founder investment team, and we also have an in-house operations team. I would almost claim like a micro Andreessen Horowitz, because I don't claim to be as big as Andreessen Horowitz, of course. And so that's the main difference. That's what we do. And so how we invest from seed to Series B, and we are sector agnostic. Also, we do have one of our funds who is dedicated to fintech and insurtech. So now after 9 years, we have 260 million under management, a bit more than 50 active startups. We've started to do some exits, and we invest mostly 2/3 of our money in France and 1/3 in Europe and rest of the world. Rest of the world being mostly the US. So before digging into Europe, let me show you something that is done. It's a map done by our friends of Serena Capital, which is another plain vanilla VC like us. So you can see us in the middle of the map as a plain vanilla VC in France. So you see, for those of you who don't know France, we do have a number of funds in France, and I'm going to come back to that later on. And as in other countries, I suppose we have corporate ventures, we have PE funds, we have small VC teams, and more and more we have European VCs who invest in France. I'm sure we can discuss that a bit later on in the pitch. And we have some seed specialists too. So now let's skip to today's subject, which is Europe, and again, Europe versus the US. So in Europe, for those of you who don't know, we do have a number of funds because it has been exploding over the past like 10 years. So the source is always written in the slide. So here the source is Dealroom. And so we have more than 7,000 VC funds in Europe, and almost 2,000 are early stage investors. As you might know, or you might guess, the UK is still leading the game with 27% of the VC fund in the UK. They started before us, maybe after the US, but before us. And then Germany and France are really close to one another, and every year it's a competition between Germany and France on VC fund and the amount of money we're going to raise and stuff like that. Rest of Europe is 50%. As you know, we have 27 countries in the EU, and so you can see the Nordics here with quite a large number of funds as well. And Eastern Europe is getting in the game now with VC regulation, European regulation in Europe, trying to promote VC funds also in Eastern Europe. So if I zoom now on early stage VC funds, which is the topic today, again, you can see that in the UK, they have about 400 funds, which is twice the numbers of Germany and a bit more than twice the number in France. of note here is Spain. Spain is, I think Spain is like France maybe a couple of years ago. So Spain is really an interesting country nowadays to invest with more and more funds and more interesting startups. The Nordics, as you know, quite a number of scale-ups like Spotify came from the Nordics, so it's also very interesting to invest in the Nordics. And again, Eastern Europe is getting on track. This one is a bit striking. I like this slide. It's a number of VCs with secondary offices. Here, what I'm trying to understand is, are VC international or local? And it seems that in the US, just 17% of US VCs have secondary offices. Maybe it's easier to operate from Boston or Silicon Valley or wherever. Although in Europe, because it's more fragmented, maybe we have 38% of European VCs who have one or more secondary offices. And now if I dig into what that means, namely the international presence, you can see that 29% of US VC with a second office have an international presence, the rest meaning that maybe it's West Coast and East Coast. And 90% of European firms with second offices have an international presence. So, and again, that's really was striking, that 16% of us European firms have a full-time US office. I have to admit that Breega does not have a full-time European US office, although we do invest in the US. So as you can see, it's very difficult for European VC just to remain in its own country. Again, it's 27 countries, so it's very tough to build unicorns if you don't go out of your own country. So our startups become scale-ups outside of our country, so we have to do the same. For example, at Breega, we have an office in London, an office in Paris, and we'll soon open one in Barcelona. So we have to do that. I was trying to understand as well, what are the numbers of debut and emerging managers firms in Europe and the US? And as you can see, the numbers are not that different. And even in the US, which is like 50 years old market, you have 40% of funds which are debut funds, i.e. it's your number one fund as a VC manager, and still 83% of total are emerging managers, which means you have fund 1, 2, and 3. So out of that slide, my take on that slide is that if you still have room in the US to develop new funds as fund managers, well, then in Europe, you really have room to develop, because we are maybe, I don't know, I don't have the numbers, but 20 years late or 10 years late, although we catch up. So it explained that in Europe, like I would almost claim every morning you have a new fund manager trying to set up a new fund in a country in Europe, but figures are pretty similar. I would have expected different figures to be less in the US. So of course we do have less assets under management in Europe than people in the US. So I have to move this picture, okay, because I didn't see my slide, sorry. So on the left, it's in billion euro, and on the right, it's in $1 billion. Different to change them because exchange rate is different every year. But you can see that in Europe, it's growing rather fast over the past years, and we are now between 15 and 20 billion euros fundraising per year for all of the European VCs. And in US, it's closer to 50 and now $70 billion. So we are still, I would say, almost 3 times or a bit more than 3 times smaller. Of course, we are growing faster, but my American friends would claim it's easier to grow faster when you start smaller. So, but we are catching up, I think, in a month's rate in Europe. Oops, sorry. Okay. So let's talk about VC investment trends. Again, Europe versus US. This one I think is very interesting. You can see on the left, so the source is deal room again. You could see on the left that the biggest country in Europe is investing about a third. Not a third. 1/10 of the total investment in the US per year. So in the US, it's last year, 2020, was about $125 billion invested, and the biggest European country with the UK with almost 14 billion. So it's still very small. Now, if you, and again, as I said before, Germany and France are quite close. Depending on the years, Germany is before France, or France is before Germany. And Spain is catching up, although still much smaller than Germany and France. On the right, we aggregated whole of Europe. So you can see again on 2020 or even 2019, because maybe 20 was a specific year with the pandemic. You can see that we are about 1/3 smaller still in terms of VC investments than our US friends. But now in terms of number of deals, you can see that on the top of the chart. You can see there that in the US, the number of deals is decreasing over the past 3 years, which obviously means that in the US, deal sizes are bigger and bigger. And we've seen a number of mega rounds above $100 million in the US that we do not see that many mega rounds in Europe, although it's coming. And in Europe, the number of deals is increasing. So now much bigger than in the US, but again, Europe is big if you aggregate the 27 countries. So so there's no reason it should be different than that. So now I'm trying to zoom on the 4 biggest countries. So the US again, you had maybe we could analyze 2020 and S1 2021. So 2020 in the US, you had 5,000 deals for $125 billion or euros, sorry. Second was again the UK with 1.4 thousand deals. Third was France with 648 deals. And fourth was Germany with 578 deals. And you can see that S1 2021 was really incredible in the US, because you already have 114 billion euro invested in half of the year for almost 3,000 deals. And you can see about the same phenomenon in Europe. If you see the UK, they have invested almost the same amount of money in S1 than in the whole of 2020 for 800 deals. In France, same phenomenon. We have invested 4.5 billion euro and more than 300 deals. And Germany is getting back, striking back, I would say, with 7.4 billion. So they've outgrew France in S1 2021 with more than 300 deals. So the activity is really booming in Europe and in US in 2021 for S1. On this slide, I'm trying to see the increase in deal size, which is quite interesting since 1 year, 1 or 2 years, because as you know, we did not have a lot of mega rounds in Europe in the past years, and we did not have a lot of unicorns. So we do have a clear increase in deal sizes and deal amounts of 25 million and over in the past few years, and a clear decrease in deal sizes of less than 5 million rounds. So last year, I took what I think are top 5 flagship raises in 2020. I'm sure you've heard of most of them. So Klarna in fintech in Sweden, more than 500 million fundraise. Northvolt, again in Sweden, more than 500. Revolut, you all know Revolut, 460 million euro in the UK. And Karma Kitchen, 300 million. And I was obliged to have a French one, so Miracle Marketplace Solutions, 250 million euros. So maybe for our US friends, this did not happen a couple of years ago in Europe, and now it's more and more commonplace that we have these mega rounds. And as we'll discuss later in the presentation, in most of the case, or in many cases, we have foreign investors, so non-European VCs helping us for these mega rounds. So you can see on the right the percentage of deal sizes And so, as you can see, the top one being the 25 million and plus deal sizes are increasing more and more, and the very small, like under 500K or between 500K to 1 million, are decreasing in Europe as they do in the US. So in terms of sector, in Europe, we've seen a very strong, again, software investments in 2020, as you can see on the bar charts on the right. So software is the gray area, the first gray area on the bottom. It's very strong. And we also have a lot of investment in biotechnology, also fueled by the pandemic last year. But there's the two very strong investment area in Europe. And maybe it's also one of the reasons why we have more and more European VCs, because software and especially SaaS companies are increasingly popular in Europe. And as you know, a lot of American VCs are very competent in SaaS investments. So that one, I think we can be proud of that. Couple of years ago, and especially in France, for those of us who know our president, Emmanuel Macron, we had the claim that we would build some unicorns. It was mostly a claim a couple of years ago. We now have, of course, we are still far behind Asia and far behind the US, but we now have 71 European unicorns. Again, UK has the lead with 1/3 of them. France is second with 21%. And then I mentioned the Nordics before. Sweden and Germany are at par with 17% of the unicorns, and rest of Europe in total is 13%. So I just mentioned here the 11 new unicorns of the last 8 months, which is a lot, because, you know, again, before we had like 1 unicorn every couple of months, and now we have 11 in 8 months. I'm sure you, I don't know, but I'm sure you know Gorillas, you know, Back Market is French, Ledger is French, Alam is French, and Bestia Collective also. So that's the number of new unicorns on the past 8 months. So now, maybe it's I don't know if I call that the dark side of the moon, but it's a dark side in a way. It's the exit amounts in Europe, which are lagging behind the US, and that's a bit of the problem of the European ecosystem, because now we do have, I think, enough money to invest, or at least mega rounds are no longer a problem, but exits are still a problem, with French and European corporates maybe not acquisitive like the US corporates could be acquisitive, mostly because, to my analysis, mostly because the stock market is not liquid enough like in the US. So as you can see from the bar charts here, if you take 2020, for example, we had a total of 150 billion euro of exits in Europe, and it was more than, well, close to 500 billion in the US. So, you know, we are still 1/3 of the exits in the US, and that's maybe the biggest problem of the European ecosystem. And more than that, a lot of exits are with US player. So I'm not going into geopolitics here, but maybe it would be better if some European corporates would buy our scale-ups if they could or if they wanted. On that slide, and I'm going to the end of my presentation in the 20 minutes, but it's very interesting to see that back in 2016, I think we were not seen in Europe as an interesting continent to invest. You can see that our US and Asian friends total would invest like 12% of the deals, and now they are up to 23% of the deals. So you could see it as a good or as a bad news, depending on where you stand from. But I think it's very interesting to see that American and US VCs now do want to invest in European startups, and I think they like European technology now. So that will be my last slide, I think, just in time. The key takeaways for me would be that European VC is thriving despite the 2020 COVID pandemic. My second point would be that we do have now abundant liquidity on the market. We have more VC money to invest in innovation, it's no longer a problem like it was when I set up Breega 9 years ago. We have a recent rapid increase in European unicorns, which is, to me, still the beginning of the story, because then you have at one point to exit. So either by IPO or by selling the company to someone else. So it's good, but it's not the end of the journey. And I think and the number of US investors coming now to Europe is a proof that we have an attractive and thriving ecosystem for foreign investors now. And I think that's very good. And that would be all from me. Thank you.
Francois, thank you for your presentation, for getting our audience up to date on current developments and the landscape in Europe on the venture capital side. Very, very interesting presentation, very interesting graphs and developments as things continue to progress. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you in the future again.
My pleasure. Bye.
Have a good evening.